Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. I'm Will Schick, the Director of Product Development for Atomic Mass Games. Excited to be here with you today on this fine Wednesday. We've got some sweet Star Wars Legion to paint. I'm going to be working on some BX series Commando Droids. We're going to have some fun. Dallas, I know last week while I was on vacation, did some really cool Kashyyyk style forest camo on a clone trooper. So I thought, let's keep that ball rolling and kind of keep the theme going. But I was going to shift it up and do an urban style camo. I'm going to be doing the blue urban style camo that you see in a lot of apparel and clothing and stuff like that. So it's just going to kind of be a very traditional technique where we're going to lay down some colors. We're going to do a bunch of different model patterning. I'm going to use 4 different primary blues from the scale 75 range. We're just going to have some fun and see what's going on. So with that, I'm going to get this camera off of me. We're going to move it on to the stars of the show, which is this little unit of BX series droids. And we have our unit of 4 that we're going to be working on today. I did opt to give these fellas the Vibro Sword upgrade because I felt like if the kind of story behind this entire unit is it's sneaking around an urban environment in their urban camo, probably trying to like eliminate high value targets like leaders or generals or somebody hanging out. And I just thought we'd have a nice break from the greens and kind of the other stuff. Just do a different version of camo to show how I would approach an urban style. So with that, we're going to do all 4 of these little characters here. And these are going to be the colors that I'm going to be using. So I have Despair Green from the Fantasy and Games line, which is a nice kind of, it says it's green, but it's really more of like a rich green blue. We have Arctic Blue, which we're going to be mixing in for our brighter colors. We're going to be using this Innsmouth Blue for kind of our mid-tone, and then we have this Rattler Gray for our neutral kind of gray mix. We're going to mock all these up together, model them up, and just kind of go crazy. So I didn't do, because I want this color scheme to come out a little darker, I did not actually do the Zenith Prime. I just primed these BX droids black, and I left it at that. So we're not going to be using any Zenith Prime. I just totally spit my brush out and dropped it on the ground. Oh, bend over and grab that. Okay. So we're just using the straight black. Now we could have done this over a Zenith Prime, and it likely would have worked out just perfectly fine. But I do notice that the Despair Green, when put over a lighter base coat, does kind of showcase its green undertones a bit more. So I think the black overall is going to give us a really nice what we want for the base coat. And that's where we're going to start. So I'm just going to start with the Despair Green, and we're going to slap on a very quick and even base of the Despair Green on everything. And this is the number one thing when trying to decide or when working on a camo pattern is you do want to go through and figure out what your base coat or what your solid like base color is going to be. And depending on what you pick, for when I did Kashyyyk Troopers a while ago, and then when Dallas did his, typically you pick whatever the color is that you want to have the most of showing through to be that color. So it's usually your mid-tone. When looking at camoing patterns, the darks, the really deep darks and the really high highs are kind of the modeling effect. So you want to avoid those. But, it is Star Wars. It is your own kind of like color choices and artistic choices. So you could do something really crazy. You could obviously, do a pink and purple model camo if you wanted to. I don't know what that would be useful for, but maybe a Felucia style camo would work that way because there's a lot of really bright, crazy colors on Felucia. This could also like work really well for maybe an Umbaran style kind of camo because it's a night world, so we're going to be going really dark, really deep, rich blues and grays. So again, anything that you've seen Dallas do or myself do or whatever like that, all of that can be basically utilized with any color that you choose. So you just have to kind of like pick your tones. The big thing is find your medium tone, your mid tone that you want to have the majority of the miniature be, then go back in and knock out those, the little bit darker, the little bit lighter. You can use some pretty significantly different tones and saturations as well, and just kind of like blend those together and model them to make that camo. The more visually distinct and diverse it is, kind of the better when it comes down to stuff like that. The biggest challenge, of course, for most folks is getting the patterning to look correct at the scale. Um, so the last time I did camo, I used stippling. I don't exactly know what Dallas used because I was not around for his Clone Trooper one, but I imagine that he probably used a little bit of stippling and maybe a little bit of brush control. So today we're going to use, I would say, the slightly more challenging technique where we're just going to go in with a nice brush and we're going to paint in our modeled texture. And the reason that that's difficult is not so much the brush control portion of it, although you do want to be aware of your shapes. It really comes down to kind of controlling your need to make everything symmetrical and letting kind of those more natural like modeling patterns happen. So you do want to give yourself a little bit of leeway and flexibility to be able to go in and make things not perfect. But that's also why I think camoing techniques can be a lot easier than people think they are, because you aren't looking for perfect symmetry. You do want something that is more organic and chaotic in the final analysis, because that's how camoing patterns work. It's supposed to kind of blend into the environment. And so it really just comes down to making sure that your shapes that you paint on there are the right scale so that you can see them and so that they feel like a real camoing pattern at the scale. I'm not using too thin coats because I don't really need to. Right now, I'm kind of allowing that darker undercoat to work to my advantage, again, because the Despair Green works pretty well over that darker undercoat, and because any kind of natural uh, color difference between like the solid base coat and that translucency I can just use to my advantage, because again I'm going for that modeled camo effect, so we can really be, I don't want to call it sloppy, but we can be quick and efficient. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna call it efficient in this case, and use that to our advantage as well. Because again, that nice uniform, like even coloring is not gonna make the most realistic camo effect. And we do want those different tones to be in there and to play around with. If you got really crazy, you could certainly do like some wet blending on your modeling and like make everything blend and mesh together. We'll probably use a little bit of a glaze at the very end to just tie all of our colors together and to make our patterning kind of smooth out and feel correct. And the other nice thing about the really dark colors right now is that if we do miss a spot or we leave some black on there, it's not going to be the end of the world because our colors are going to be deep and dark enough that it's probably not even going to be noticeable. It's not going to stand out like it would if we were using that zenith gray base coat. And the trade-off, of course, is that our color palette overall is going to be a lot darker than it would be if we were on using a lighter primer color, because that black is going to absorb so much of the light, and it's just going to make everything on top of it darker. Oh, we're going to lose the sword. I thought I glued the sword well, but it looks like it's going to come off. So I'm just going to save myself the worry and the hassle, and we're just going to pull it off. And we'll glue it back on later. This is kind of fun because you can see the difference in how that Despair Green goes on, like here where it's just over the basic plastic, which is a lot lighter. But you can see on camera how much the different kind of tone that you get from doing it over a lighter base coat. And that's one of the things I like about a lot of the scale colors, Hold Your Blue being the most classic, is they're such rich colors. They're so saturated with pigment. They really do change kind of their overall final finish based on the undercoat that they're placed over. So that is the way to go here. The biggest thing with the too thin coats thing, because now the chat's talking about it, is you want to make sure that your paint is thin enough that it's not obscuring detail. So the too thin coats thing, what that really says is don't glop paint onto the miniature, because you're going to cover up some of the finer details and it's going to look mushy. As long as your paint is applying smoothly and evenly, then you have nothing to worry about. And in this case, one thin coat is enough to get me to where I want to be. In many other cases, though, it totally wouldn't be. And that's why you want to do two thin coats instead of one thick coat. So it's kind of just a lesson or a statement for success in life when it comes to not obscuring the miniature and making things messed up. Okay, so here we go. We've got that initial blue down. I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shift over to the Rylith Gray. So we're going to go to the Rylith Gray now. And this is all over that Despair Green base coat. And we're just going to see how this goes. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do camos. You could go for a digital camo for that. If I wanted to do something a little more digitally, I would start going in with the tap method and stuff. I think we're just going to go for like some more natural model. So the biggest thing I'm going to do here, so I'm just going to start like meshing in some organic shapes. And again, the biggest trick, when it comes down to it, is simply trying to control the overall size and shape of that modeling texture. If you make it too small, it's going to be really hard to paint for one, and then too big, if you make it too big, it's going to look awkward. It's going to look wrong. And so what I like to do, it's kind of like painting lightning. You just kind of find a spot, make a big old mush of it, and then let it trail back down. And it's not always to sharp points. You do want it to kind of have a little bit of roundness and smoothness, have it cross over panels and stuff. So whereas normally you'd want to sometimes be really careful about coming over some of the different segments and shapes, like on the face. If you imagine that this is getting painted over the base primer layer, like this is getting applied after the part. So to me, the pieces themselves weren't painted in the camo color. Instead, whoever it was, whatever droid commander or service droid, whichever techno service droid was working on them at the time, they applied the paint over the top of whatever the base color of the droid was, similar to how, you see in all those army movies, all those great action movies where they're in the choppa and they're applying the face paint over the top of their faces, and modeling it up. That's kind of what we're doing here. Same idea, same kind of overall plan. So again, I want to make sure that the base coat still remains pretty heavy, but I do, it's kind of a balance. And less can be more, so sometimes you just want to stop yourself and not worry about it. You're going to see how it's not super stark yet, but you can start to see how it's coming out as we add more and more colors on top of it and we start mixing our stuff together. It's really going to start to pop. And we're just going through shapes. So just looking for places where we can just really mash it in. Make kind of like those pseudo lightning bolt shapes. So if you like to paint lightning bolts on things, use kind of a similar approach with the brush control. And now we're just going to start modeling these textures together. So move forward, and I'm just going to start to speed up just a little bit. So everyone's asking in the chat about differences between paint lines. The real answer is that, every paint line kind of behaves differently. They have different drying mats. So some paint lines will dry really super matte. A lot of the basic scale 75 colors do that. They are They're a very matte drying paint, which depending on the effect that you're getting can be good, can be bad. You can modify any of that with satin mediums, matte mediums, all of that good stuff. The way they flow off the brush, how much water you have to apply to them to get them smooth can be really different. The way in which they dry, like everything about paints from different lines and everything can be very, very different. And it's kind of up to you as the artist to determine what attributes are most important to you when it comes to the paints that you use. Are you looking for a high pigment value because you want to make a lot of washes? That might lead you to something like scale, which we really like because it does have some really super punchy colors. Oh no. Yeah, my glue just did not dry on these guys for some reason. That's okay. We can work around this guy. Just know not to push very hard. So you can look for high pigment content. Sometimes just the overall number of colors that are available can be a huge thing if you don't want to do a lot of mixing or stuff. And most paint lines have a very good collection of colors. There are specialty paint lines like the Chimera range, which is really designed for the artist approach of you're going to do a lot of color mixing and you get these really bright, vibrant base colors, but everything else is up to you to kind of put together and mix on a wet palette. Yeah, and then of course where you live might also affect how some of these attributes work. If you're, no, poor little droid, come here, it's fine. We'll glue you back to your base later. So if you're in a really arid environment, you might find that one paint line maintains its flow better than another, and that might lead you to choose it. The true statement really is that the only way to know is to experiment. So go out, grab different colors, grab what you think is cool, give it a try, watch reviews and watch people paint with other stuff and see if it strikes your fancy. But you know, I'm doing this a long time, and the only real way that I've assembled my personal painting kit based on finding colors that I really thought looked cool. Certain things like Vallejo black glaze, which I've really only ever found in that line and I really like. So I'll use that, and then I'll use the Inktense inks from Scale because they're amazing inks. But you know, Scale doesn't really have any washes that I've used, like pre-mixed washes. So I'll go maybe grab a couple of pre-mixed washes from another paint line and all that. It's just mix and match. There's no right or wrong answer. There's only what you like. And so folks can kind of be like, oh, I've had really good success with this color or this paint line, and I really like it because of this. And that's all great. But at the end of the day, you yourself can have to try it because everyone is an artist, is using different techniques, is looking for different kind of things out of the paint line. And what might not work for somebody may be exactly what you find is the best for you. And so that's why I always like to, mix reviews with experience and give it a try. Oh no, the dogs are going crazy. All right, so we're just going to finish out this Rylith Gray. We're modeling here. And the nice thing about doing this on the droids or on the clones too is that you have these nice big fat panels, so you can kind of like mess around with those a little bit and just play. That can all work in. So, pretty happy with where we are here. Okay, so I'm going to shift over my colors. I think we're going to jump over and start using this Innsmouth blue. So we're just going to use this to kind of like Well, we know the audio works really well then if you thought they were your neighbor's dogs. But no, they're mine. They're barking at something. All right, let's get back into focus here. Okay, so we're just going to grab this Infinite Blue. And again, I'm doing just a little bit of water to thin these, not a ton. And now we're just going to kind of come in and we'll do some more lighter modeling. I'm kind of like looking for, so I want this next batch to kind of come over the top of what I've already done. So a little bit where like I've attached the gray, I might put in a little bit of blue. Can maintain on that color for you. I want them to crisscross because again, it's a camo is kind of a mixture of these different shapes coming together and messing around with each other. So everything should be over mushing and crisscrossing and all that stuff. But because we're not, we're not making that pattern ourselves or with a machine, we also don't want to spend 7 hours trying to make the perfect camo model. So look for the places where it's going to have the highest impact visually. I'm not really worrying about the places of shadow. So like under the arm, things like that. Really the legs. No, and we talk about how legs don't really get looked at very often by people. So you're kind of looking at like torso. The head especially is going to be a huge spot where you'll get a lot of bang for your buck if you spend a little bit of extra time there. Give them that cool like Commando war paint feature going on. But again, you do want to stop from time to time and take a look at the visual whole, because you can get to a point to where you will get too zoned in on a specific panel or armor plate or something, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I need more stuff here and I need more stuff here, and what about over here? And you have to take in the whole canvas of the miniature to decide if that's really necessary. So you can kind of see how we're pulling together all these different shapes and making things work nice. The different colors, and that's going to even come into more as we add the higher layers here. And again, a big trick to make this look more natural and realistic is to make sure that you're going over, like start a line here on the ankle and pull it all the way across over the foot, right? So you're connecting these areas that shouldn't be connected because they're different panel lines with the same stripe of paint. And that's what's going to make it feel like, again, because our point here is to make it look like somebody took a brush or a spray can and just sprayed on a nice like camo line. And if they did that, they would obviously go over panel lines and they'd break boundaries, and the line weight wouldn't be quite symmetrical and all that stuff. So this is kind of your free reign to really be not perfect. In fact, the less perfect you are, the more natural that camo is going to look. So you see how the colors are starting to pull together now. We're getting these different textures and fades. So we'll just continue to do that on each one. Whoop, get into focus there. Thin out my paint just a little bit. And now if you wanted to do something more digital, like, you have the digital camo, which is more regimented. It's like a lot of little checkers or check boxes that are all over the place. I would stipple that. So you could do a stippling effect. You could also do that if you wanted a finer version of the camo. You didn't want to go through and do all of these different model patterns, and I would totally get it if you wanted that. In fact, that's how I would normally approach doing camo. You get a finer, kind of a finer finish, so it's not quite as stylistic, but it is quite a bit quicker because the stippling just goes faster and you can do multiple layers. It's like dry brushing. You can do multiple layers without really worrying about it as much. Let's see how we're just kind of like pulling all this together. So this, hopefully when we're done, will very much look like the squad that jumps out of an alley at night and causes a whole lot of problem for our Jedi friends. We're trying to protect whomever, the senator, or maybe even Chancellor Palpatine himself. He always liked to arrange some fun little ambushes for himself, put himself in danger. So we can go get saved. Connect that over here. And then I do have a tendency, and I think most people do, is like whichever, I'm right-handed, so I really like drawing my lines to the right. And that's okay, but you know, we do want to have like some lines that come down to the left and stuff. You don't want everything to go in the same direction. So you can either kind of do the weird thing where you cross your line and you pull the direction that you don't really like to. Alternatively, you can flip the mini upside down. And then that also gives you that chance to kind of like come in and do some different angles on your modeling texture as well. Cross like that. And we do want to watch that more is less is more in most cases. So we're going to be adding more and more colors to this guy. So we don't want to go too far with it. To the side, come into the next one. Whoop. Get him into focus. Water in there. So if you need to track, if you're mixing a lot of colors, if you're doing something that requires a lot of color mixing, the best advice that I ever got was to start a painting journal. So grab any kind of notebook, or you know, if you want to use your digital device, your phone or your iPad or Kindle or whatever you can write on. I like doing it in a physical notebook, and there's a couple reasons for that. One, I just like writing on real paper more, and two, if you do it in a actual pen and paper notebook, you have the benefit of being able to take your mix and put a little swatch next to the ingredients. And so then what you do is you take that painting notebook, your little diary, and you write in, okay, I used 2 drops of Rylith Gray with 1 drop of Despair Green and 3 drops of mixing medium or matte medium. And now you have your ratio. And so if you add your swatch to that, then at any point in time in the future, you can go back to the mix. You have your ratios like specifically listed out, which is fantastic. And you've got your color swatch that you can match to. And so this allows you everything that you need in order to confidently go back and recreate a color. You don't have to just look at it on the miniature and be like, oh, I don't remember what I did. Was it this color? Was it that color? It's a really handy tool and amazingly good if you're working on a lot of different projects, or you're working on, say you have your droid army and you've got your Empire army, and you shift back and forth, and it's a couple of months or maybe even a year, before you go back and you said, oh, I want to add something to that. Or maybe you start a new project, like you're doing clones, but you want the clone white to match kind of your stormtrooper white that you mixed up. That painting journal, just like a recipe book, gives you everything you need to be able to go back and confidently recreate, to a varying level of degree, just like with cooking. Everything you make is kind of slightly different. But you can recreate everything with a lot of confidence and you know what it is. And if you keep it going over time, you create a really comprehensive book of like color recipes. And especially if you're doing painting like professionally, you know, you're working for like a studio or whatever like that, that recipe book becomes invaluable because it means that everything that you paint will always be consistent. You can pass it on to other people who might have to paint the stuff later. It's just really good. It's really useful, and you can always go back and mix, you know, modify recipes, like change recipes, all that stuff. So that's, even if you're not doing a lot of color mixing, but you do some, or you work on a lot of different projects, you know, because who among us doesn't just have one hobby project? We're always like in the middle of painting three armies, I feel like, most of the time. Um, so, you know, even if you're not mixing a lot of colors, you can just say, okay, here's the recipe for how I paint my BX series droids. Here's the recipe for how I paint my clone troopers. And you list out each step or each color that you use with its recipe, even if it's just like, I use despair green, and you put a little color swatch next to it, and that's it. So it's like the body, despair green, done. But 4 years, 5 years down the road, however many years, you come back to that, you look at it, and you're like, how did I paint those again? Oh yeah, there's my recipe book right there. Despair green, nailed it. Um, it's definitely it's a tool, it's a painter tool that I don't think gets talked about a ton, but is definitely one that will change your entire hobby life if you start doing it. And it has just dramatic results to the longevity of your painting. And it's really cool because you can go back, you can look at, you know, things that you did and mixes that you made, all that stuff. I couldn't tell you how I painted so many of the things that I painted way back when I was like in my teenage years or whatever, because those paints probably don't exist anymore. Um, and even if they did, I don't own them anymore. And, you know, a lot of that stuff was pretty, was not as clean. So it was kind of like whatever was on hand. But it'd be cool to go back and just be able to see, like, oh, this is what I was doing. This is how I was mixing colors. I wasn't mixing colors, that kind of stuff. Painting journal, 100% strongly recommend. Highly recommend. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with where we are on this blue, so I think we can move on to our next step. We'll just put like a swatch here and a swatch here. So we're going to move to Arctic, and one of the big things I have to determine with this Arctic blue, which we're going to do live on camera. So we're going to do the Arctic blue, and my big thing here, assuming that my Arctic blue will come out of the pot, come on, there you go, is we're going to see how stark it is, and then I might mix in a little bit of the Innsmouth blue if I feel like it's a little too strong. But we do want a pretty high contrast for the camo patterning, so I think we'll be okay. I don't know why my focus just really doesn't want to play well today with these BXs. They're camo too good, the camera can't even see them. We've already achieved success. Critical success. Okay. So now the brightest color typically is the one you want to be very sparing. So I'm pretty good with that. I don't like that line though, so I'm just going to erase it. I'm going to erase it. I'm going to start again. So again, we're kind of just looking to model everything together. Just didn't like how that look was coming out. Now I think I might have thinned the paint just a little bit too much. We'll see. Maybe. So now we're just going to kind of play with our color then come back over here. And we'll do that. And now I'm just going to do a quick mix here just to see if I would like it better if we had just a touch of that Innsmouth in there. I think the answer is I would. We're just going to experiment because we can. And this is part of like figuring out kind of your mix, and this is definitely something that again would go in that painting book in the future. So like 1 drop of Innsmouth to 3 drops of Arctic Blue. And then see, I like this a little bit better. That Arctic Blue by itself is just a little too stark. So just gonna mess around with this, and then maybe we'll come back through and do a little bit of Arctic Blue on its own. It's like a spot highlight or something. Can I go through? I'm excited. I've not played with BX droids in my own list yet, so I think these will be a nice addition. And I call it my own list, but really it's my youngest kid's list. He's the droid player, the oldest child, just picked clones like 100%. So we got the rivalry going on. I have the start of my Empire Force, my Holdra Squad, which we worked on over the month of May, which I have to go back to and flesh out a bit more. I got to add another dewback for the full-sized game, because of course dewbacks. It's the whole point of the army. It's just an excuse to paint more space dinosaurs. But I was considering giving these guys the deflector shields, but I just felt like because I really wanted this vision of this urban camo like assault unit, the shields just didn't make sense. Hard for me to envision like these little droids jumping around the city and sneaking out of shadows with like big glowing shields. I think if we were doing something that was more like Commando Droids on a starship or something, like assault boat troopers, I probably would I'd buy that a bit more. That feels more correct than this does necessarily. So maybe I'm overthinking it, but that was kind of my thought. Also, the droid army currently, as it stands, doesn't have a whole lot of offensive melee punch, and I thought, arming them with the vibro sword seemed to offer a little bit of that opportunity and option with the charge and the better dice. So give them a try. We'll see how it works. Stuff. Maybe come to the top of the head here and get in there. This is definitely the point where you might slow down a little bit. But that's okay. This is kind of your make or break point. You can always go back and correct your mistakes if you want to, but a little bit more time and attention here will hopefully save you from having to worry about that. So there, we kind of got that nice little Nice little effect going on there. And again, I think we'll do a quick glaze of color over these guys as well. And that will help tie in some of our highs and our lows a bit better. Because we do want a lot of contrast, but we also want everything to kind of like tie in. I think we're also at the point where you can, to make that pattern a bit more uneven and a little more camo-y, you can come in and at this scale, kind of doing little stripes can really help as well, especially on these higher colors. Feathering it a little bit, kind of like a feather. But it just gives it that little bit of blend, that little unevenness that it really helps make it feel like it's all tying in together, making that camo pattern. It's super exciting, I know. This is where you just kind of zone out and fall asleep. And then you come back and you're like, oh, look, he painted that little droid, and it looks okay. Looks ready for the tabletop. That's what we're doing. They're not meant for anything but the game table. So we just want them to look nice and cool. But they're not going into a competition. They're not do anything but just be something we're happy to have on the shelf and look really cool and stylistic when we're playing. Mess around with that. Come back over here. And think about how you come across those different panels, from here to here, because you imagine that somebody's just going to like drag their brush, their makeup thing, their spray can, whatever you're using to apply this patterning. They're just going to drag it over that surface. So we haven't really done a lot of cross ones yet, so we should start doing that as well, because my lines are all really starting to come straight down and stuff. And so this is kind of like my mistake and something that I need to fix here, but you can like learn from it. Because I've been doing a lot of downs because that's the way the panel lines go, but I also should be doing a crosses. So horizontal lines to where everything is, because that camoing model would not just be up and down, it would also be like straight across. And I think I'm losing a little bit of the realism of that pattern because I haven't been necessarily coming on horizontal lines. I've been a lot more up and down. And part of that is just because it feels so much more natural for me to do this rather than to go horizontal. All right, let's come over to this one. Hopefully I don't run out of my mix before I need to move on. I don't think I will. Pretty thin. All right, I'm gonna mix up a little bit more paint here really quick. Just really quick. There we go. All right. Whoa, next Friday, maybe. Saw some pretty cool separatist stuff in the office though, so there's certainly stuff coming beyond what we've already kind of shown. So there's some pretty neat stuff. A couple of things that I think are going to be really crazy. Excited to maybe try to paint one or two of them on stream. But I know that Galactic Republic so far with the Wookiees and Yoda and all that stuff has really been getting kind of the lion's share of the spotlight so far. Trust me, that will change. Still have those Magna Guard, which we showed off during Mini Stravaganza. They're going to be coming hot and heavy pretty soon. We got some other stuff from the Battle of Kashyyyk, since that was like the big kind of inspiration for a lot of what is finishing out the year this year. So there's a few other things, some surprises in store that we haven't shown off yet. There's like a whole mini Stravaganza through 2. I wanted to say 3, but that's not true. Mini Stravaganza 2. That's going to be coming up later, late summer, early fall. So there's a lot of good stuff yet to come. And there's all the stuff that's just out of this year, so. Oh, that might be true. I don't know. I wasn't here last Friday. I was still on vacation, so I did not watch John as he worked on his stuff. But like I said, it wouldn't surprise me because there's a whole lot of Separatist stuff that I've been seeing in the office. And there's stuff that we've certainly, like I said, shown, and we haven't seen posted like rule spoilers and stuff yet. So we're at a betting, man. I would say that you heard correctly. But John is the keeper of those secrets. I just kind of show up and paint for an hour and hang out. Hopefully do more help than harm when it comes to just my silly hobby stuff. It's always our goal, just kind of like hopefully demystify, answer questions about how to get started in painting or anything like that, and then maybe do a little inspiring. And if one person out there goes, oh, I kind of always wanted to do camo, but I never really thought about it, and then they go out and they paint some sweet like purple and pink camo from watching this stream or whatever, then I'd count it as a success. We have accomplished our mission, because that's all we want to do. We just want to make sure that we're hanging out, and I know a lot of people are getting back to in stores and stuff, and I've seen a lot of communities being able to open up now that vaccines are available and all that stuff, and that's awesome. But we figure even with that going on, it's still a blast to hang out with y'all and to talk and show stuff off, and just provided yet another venue for us to hang out and have some fun. Maybe try some weird things when we don't have anything new to show off, or maybe try some weird things on the new stuff to show off. I always like doing bizarre stuff on the new things too. And people are like, oh, I'm really excited to just see this way. And I'm like, well, what if we did it this way? Dallas is kind of the king of taking really crazy alternate color suggestions and just going whole hog with them. Really diving in and doing weird stuff. So people just really own that hobby. There we go. That guy looks pretty cool. Come in with this fella. One more on the lights. And then I think we'll just try to hit him with a quick glaze and call it good. No one's really going to see this part, but we'll do a little bit on here just to give him that modeling. So like this is kind of what I was talking about. See here, I did the symmetrical thing where I did this line and then I did this line, and now it doesn't really look right. So I'm gonna have to come back and fix that because they're too similar. And it's just that's part of the challenge and the fun of doing this kind of style of camo is that you can really, you got to be kind of cognizant of what you're doing. You have to be willing to come back in and just kind of like fix your mistakes, but that's painting in general. Just kind of playing around with it, finding that perfect balance of just enough but not too much. But I don't have a problem. We're all friends here. I'll point out where I think I messed something up and it doesn't look as good as I wanted it to, because that's just part of the hobby. Nobody gets it right on their very first try, or even their 15th try, you know. But the beauty of painting is that you just come back in and you just kind of like correct your mistakes, or you work around your mistakes, and then it becomes an artistic choice. And that can be a really big thing too. Dallas always talks about, he's like, yeah, you know, I threw on this wash and did this and I hated it, but then I just came back through and said, oh yeah, I'll just make that mistake the artistic, and it's like, oh, this little spot here now artistically is a nice little zing highlight or something. And you'd never even know it was kind of like a mistake, or you make it work within the composition of the piece. That is 100% a great way to approach this stuff, because it gives you a lot of freedom to experiment and try stuff, knowing that you can always go back and fix it if you want to. And sometimes fixing it isn't erasing it. Sometimes fixing it is just building your color composition around whatever the error was or the mistake was. You know, the brush slipped away from you and you wound up with a splot of paint somewhere where you didn't want it. It's not the end of the world. You can adjust that. You can fix it. The other thing I'm really liking with these colors, which, you know, was unintentional but pretty fun, is that even if we're not quite selling perfect camo, they do look very sci-fi-y. You know, there's this electricity to the colors that's going on. It almost could be like a holographic modeling or some kind of electronic camouflage, because of how we have these highs and these darks and these brights, and how they really just kind of pop off the mini. And so I'm kind of digging that, you know, unintentional happy accidents, as Bob Ross would call them, which I'm all about. I'm all about the happy accidents. Sometimes it's just the way to go. Here, we'll just make that model really big. We'll come in here and do that. Wipe it off with the finger. All right, so it's kind of where we're standing on the three that still have their base. This nice little camo patterning going on. Looks pretty fun. And I think the last thing that we're going to do, just really quick, is we'll do a quick glaze. And I'm going to go ahead and use that. I think so. I'm just going to use our Despair Green really quick. So I'm going to put a little bit of that out. I'm going to use a whole lot of water and a bit of glaze medium from Vallejo. So this is another great product from a different brand that's not scale. It comes into focus. It says glaze medium. It's really, but glaze medium, it's an excellent extender. It works really well to make washes, and then obviously its primary function is to do glazing, where we really just want this to kind of help tie our colors together. And the big trick here is going to be, we want to make sure that this is a nice thin translucent layer, because we don't want it to completely kill that electric look that we have going on. So we pull it over, we kind of like wash it down, looking for a very thin, smooth layer. We don't want it to pool or anything. We just want everything to get pulled together with that model. And so you can see, and honestly, maybe this would have allowed us to go that one extra step. If we had like 30 more minutes, we could go one more step on our camo. But you can see how this is like pulling those colors a bit more together. So they're a little less stark and a little more like one pattern. So the glaze at the end can really be the step that gets all of those very distinct and not quite combined model colors from our camo modeling, and gets them all nice and working together and feeling like they're all part of the same cohesive color. And this is really if you wanted it to feel less like somebody had painted the stripes on over like the factory base coat. You know, now it looks like, oh, the pieces are kind of designed or painted that way. And you can really see how it like pulled everything together on this layer and stuff. And so we just, if we put up this guy next to it, you know, as that glaze dries, you can see kind of the vast difference in how our colors are kind of working between the two, especially on like this guy here, right? So that glaze really pulls everything together. Am I doing a whole army in this pattern? I don't know, like maybe, maybe Hurricane Girl. I hadn't really thought about it. This was just like a fun, this was just kind of like a fun hobby project because we wanted to do some BX series battle droids today. And I was like, oh, well, let's do some camoing on them. What kind of camo? Let's do this. Red Bird, does glazed medium function differently than using water? So it does. The biggest difference for glazed medium is that as you add water to paints, it will actually separate the pigment from the medium. So all paints are like a pigment suspended in a medium of some type. Glazed medium is actually similar to the medium that is used in the paint itself. So what mediums do, and glazed medium specifically, like, you know, is kind of designed to do, is it allows you to really separate the paint pigments really, really far apart without causing them to get like, without causing them to break down. So if you've ever like thinned out a ton of paint with water, like too much water, you've ever thinned a paint too much. Oh, get back into focus, little man. Maybe you can do it. I don't want a camera. Their camo is just too good today. It's too good. So if you've ever thinned down paint too much with water, like here, I can show you. So here's my really messy palette, right? Let's take this despair green. We'll put it here. And then, because I'm going to be like a slop with this, so just grab water, and you grab more water, and you grab more water. And you see those little bubbles, those bathtub rings that are happening there? So now the paint is like broken down to the point that it doesn't really stick. It just kind of like, you know, if I try to paint here, do you see how it pulls apart and it leaves all these little splotches and these holes and stuff, and it doesn't want to adhese, right? I never clean my palette, like once in a year. But you can see how, you know, all this water here is doing that. So if I take the despair green again, and I take a bunch of glazed medium, oh, it's right here, and I mix the despair green into the glazed medium, and I can mix a little bit of water in this with it too, but you can see how it kind of like, it maintains, you see how it maintains its adhesion? So it's as thin as it was with the water, but it doesn't pull apart. It doesn't like create those little bathtub rings. So it goes a whole lot, it goes on much smoother, much more evenly. And you can add a little bit of water to it too. Like I don't typically only use glazed medium. I like to add just a little bit of water too for that smoothness. So like here, I'm using the wet brush to kind of like spread out the paint, but you can see how it still sticks. Whereas with that water, it didn't. And so this allows you to create really good translucencies. And you can kind of see that on the white here now. Like we have this really nice despair green translucency. Whereas over here, it's like all splotchy and gross as it dries. So that's the big thing. And that's what makes mediums of any type really important. Glazed medium just happens to be the one that I use. And obviously, by its name, it's kind of meant for glazing, which is this technique here, where we're just trying to like lay a thin layer of paint over the top of a surface to tint it. You can get close with water, but it doesn't stick the same. It doesn't do the properties the same. So, you know, mixing medium, matte medium, all those mediums are just what the paint is made of, and just allows everything to go together. So I'm going to switch this. Boop, boop. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed our time together. I certainly loved hanging out with all of you. Great questions in the chat as always. Be sure to come back tomorrow. We're going to have Dallas Kemp. He's going to be painting something cool. And then we're going to have John Schaefer. I believe he's going to be working on that sweet diorama that he was working on last week between Yoda and Count Dooku. So I definitely want to see how he finishes up with that. Otherwise, for all the latest and greatest information, especially see those Scepter spoilers that are coming, sounds like this Friday. Should have been this Friday if you said it next Friday, right? Sometime soon. Be sure to check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And of course, continue to paint along with us. Post all of your stuff. Hashtag My Star Wars Legion and hashtag My Star Wars X-Wing. I think there's an X-Wing one too now. But hashtag My Star Wars Legion. We love seeing that stuff. We love posting it up. So until next time, take care. Be beautiful to each other. Enjoy all those games. And we will see you on the next one. Goodbye.